Okay, here we go. Today's wake up philosophy. Not really philosophy. Thought of the day, something like that. Sitting here catching up with an interview Dr. K did on with Jordan Harbinger, and there are a number of really good points in here. It's well worth the watch. It's from a few weeks back, middle of last month they did this, and Dr. K is making a really essential point that I don't think we hear enough, and it's critical to understand that when we shut down our feelings to not feel pain or some other emotion that we find uncomfortable or unsettling, we're shutting down all the emotions. It's not a la carte. You cannot just be like, I don't want to feel pain or jealousy or anger or fear, and I still want to feel happy, secure, connected, fulfilled. You can't have both. It's not pick and choose. You have the ability to feel emotions at higher and lower levels, and the more you push it down, the more depressed you become. And sometimes when we push it too high, we get into like anxious or manic states. So what we want to do is be in the band where we can feel all of the emotions, because you're going to feel them even at the extremes. Even if you push everything down, you almost feel nothing. It's not going to be the light, effervescent, joyous feelings that are left when you get done pushing the system all the way down. It's going to be the bare bones survival emotions that are, hunger, anger, fear, these things. Like, that's, hunger's not an emotion, but these feelings and emotions will be left, but not much else, because the emotions that we usually enjoy and seek are really peacetime emotions. We don't have bandwidth for that when we're in survival mode. So when you push it all down, this is the closest you get to a la carte. You basically strip away the potential for any of the good feelings, put yourself in a state where you barely feel anything, and then the only signal that comes through is the intense survival drives, right? So that's what we're going to be left with if we push it down. And if we take in the information and get it into a feedback loop that gets us worked up, we're ruminating, we're catastrophizing, we're doing whatever, we're going to elevate those emotions so much that we're going to feel all this input coming through so strong that, again, it's going to push us into a survival mode. It's going to be, instead of we're shutting down, we're dying, what do we need to do to turn the system back on and stay alive another day? It's going to be like we're under assault and we have to respond to a threat, and we got to be vigilant and ready, and we end up hyper adrenalized, and again you go into a survival state. So even though you're at the high end of feeling, you're also not able to enjoy the pleasant emotions, the lighter states of being, because you're in another survival state, and that's always going to be a luxury. Like, feeling good is a luxury as far as our organism is concerned. We are meant to exist another day and make more people to exist. That's it. That's all the system left to its defaults is going to want to do. And we have to give it guidance. And if we say, I don't want to feel anything, it shuts everything down. You're not going to shut down the pain and keep the pleasure. You're going to lose that band in which you're going to move out of that band in which you can experience the pleasant and productive states and emotions, and you're going to go down to where there's nothing but the bare bones survive another day stuff. And if you take it in such a way that you amplify it and amplify it and amplify it until it's just this non-stop high-pitched frenzy somewhere in the background all the time, it's going to be the same thing. If the system's going to read that as we're under assault and we need to respond to that, we don't have time for humor and love and security, and we can't be navel gazing when nasal gazing. Okay, we can't do that either. We can't be doing those things when we are in these extreme states of anxiety and depression. Pressed down, right? And to be anxious. Angst is like a pain. It's a dread, and we don't want to be in dread. We don't want to be turned off. We want to be in that middle ground, which is a fairly wide band. There's a lot going on there. It's not like hitting the side of a barn. But so many of us struggle because we aren't really taught how to take in the sensory input, I think is what Dr. K was saying. It's a great way of putting it. because we're an array of sensors, and then we've got data processors, and then what arises from that we experience as being me. I am like this. This is how my world is. This is what I know. That's the result of those things. So understanding how those systems work and how we can actively guide them to keep us in a good operating range is really essential to being balanced and healthy and happy. And not saying I have depression, I have anxiety. I think this is dangerous. It's like some I don't know, humor or demon has like possessed your body and now you have this thing. It's a practice, it's a way of being, and I'm not saying that the symptoms and the experience of depression and anxiety aren't real. I'm saying the model we use, none of the models are real. They're all concepts. But the models we apply, the way we practice, the application of our understanding of the knowledge available to us is as much of our depression and anxiety as the experience. And what I believe, no, that's not fair. I think you can have a physiological issue put you out of balance and cause the chain reaction that results in depression or anxiety, let's say, right? It could also be fine and think ourselves into it. So whether something's happened to us physically, say I've had a surgery, an accident, an illness, even childbirth, any of these things are going to change what's going on with us pretty dramatically. And if we understand that that's going to have an impact on us and we are responsible for what that does, then we can seek out and apply the tools that allow us to guide and direct the processes within our system more effectively. Understanding that this is a temporary state, like me being depleted physiologically would naturally give rise to me feeling this way emotionally. This would impact my state this way. I know how to interact with my emotions. I can stay with them, not shut them down, not amp them up, just be with them as they are, at the level they enter. And I can give good guidance to my system to say, hey, we've got this. This is a rough stretch. We're going to get through the bottleneck. These are the steps we're going to take to get through the bottleneck. Here's where we're headed. Here's what we're going to do when we get there. And once the system has that kind of guidance, it flies on course and hits its target again. It may zigzag for a while initially, but this is how we write it. And in doing that, we do have some control over whether we slip out to the extremes of the band or if we can stay in that sweet spot in between. And yeah, and it could be something really scary happens. I have to really sit with myself when I get a scare and be like, okay, this thing has happened. You are still here. We know the way forward. The sooner we take steps to get forward, the sooner this fear will fall away and be in my rear view, rolling back over the horizon as I'm moving toward where I want to be. And that sense of power will alleviate a lot of the fear that underlies the anxiety. We convince ourselves something's really wrong. We have to go in and be like, yeah, something bad happened. That's true. But nothing bad's happening now. We're okay right now. Look, show me what the problem is right now. No problem. Okay. So within that space, let's figure out where we want to go, what the steps are, and start taking them. Because as soon as the system's moving towards something, it's going to turn over the physiology and it's going to shut down the momentum of what would then lead us out to a more chronic state of anxiety. We don't want to shut down the anxiety. We want to be afraid. There are things we need to fear. I walk out the door and there's a bear standing there. I want to say, that's not the safest situation for me. But I also want to stay calm and be able to stay responsive to it instead of just panicking and maybe making the situation worse or shutting down and just standing there frozen and vulnerable, which is a very, very deep primal response to threat. We really do run on fight, flight, and freeze. And in some psychological models, there's also fawn, where we give more of ourselves than we would because we're trying to wrestle with something we perceive as a danger to us, whether it's something happening to us or losing something we want, right? So that's like a fourth social trauma response, I guess. But fight, flight, and freeze, and we walk out and we freeze in the face of a problem. That's what starts putting us down into the shutdown. that leads to depression. So understanding this and taking a different approach, I think, could really help people stay out of those more challenging ranges, right? And actually stay in the places where we want to be. So, yeah, this is another thing. We cannot just be like, "Oh, I'm going to shut off my emotions and I'll be fine." That's what kicked this off. Is hearing Dr. K say, like, you do that, the good emotions go with it. It's absolutely the truth. And you probably will not eradicate the undesirable emotions. You'll probably reduce yourself to a place where that's all that's left, and it flares up unbidden at the worst possible times and makes everything legitimately harder for you in life. So, in trying to minimize that, and to reflect how the opposite is true at the other end of the band. If anxiety is the issue, it's about approaching it differently. And this isn't to minimize, again, the experiences people have with this. I've had experiences with both depression and anxiety in my young life, and don't wish it on anyone. I certainly don't think it's make-believe. I know once the system gets conditioned to that level, it is very difficult to recondition it initially. But once that work has begun, it gains momentum the same as the inertia kind of has its own kind of deep, it's deeply anchored in there, right? But now you put this sort of movement into the system, it's going to be prying that up and out and moving it. So understand that we can get ourselves into and out of these states, and it's a series of things we do and ways that we think about it. And that's why I say I don't like when people say I have anxiety, I have depression, or I'm depressed, or I'm anxious. That's even worse. It's like I am this thing. And it's subtle semantics, but the message goes in such that our systems are like, oh, okay, I'm anxious, then this is how anxious people behave. I'm going to do this. Oh, I'm depressed. This is what depressed people do. I'm going to behave like this. It's so important we use our language to guide our systems and ultimately ourselves out of these places that nobody really wants to be. Nobody would choose that off a menu, right? This is one of the ways I figure out what's desirable in the world. I can't say what's an ultimate good, but what's desirable in the world is what people would and wouldn't likely choose if they were presented with a menu of all the options. They wouldn't be like, yeah, I want to be depressed with anxiety and like social and sexual and psychological problems a go-go. Let's go with that. I'll sign up for that. Who would sign up for that? Very few masochists. And then at least we can identify who the masochists are and figure out if they're doing okay. Yeah, so in terms of what I think most people would choose off the menu, there are ways to come out closer to that, if not to ultimately be able to default to that in time with enough good conditioning. So, all right, that's my rambling, not fully awake thought for today. Thank you. Take care.